There's a moment that happens when someone says something cruel to you, and you feel your body tense. Your chest tightens. Your mind races to defend, explain, prove them wrong. But then, nothing comes out. Not because you're weak, but because you've spent decades reacting to people who drain you, and somewhere along the way, your body learned that the fight isn't worth the cost. There is a profound intelligence in this exhaustion. For years, your nervous system has been stuck in a loop of appeasement. Psychologists might call it the fawn response, the instinct to please or explain yourself to avoid conflict. You became an expert at reading the room, at adjusting your temperature to match the volatility of others, at swallowing your own truth just to keep the peace. But the body keeps the score, and eventually, the cost of betraying yourself to please others becomes too high. There are people who spend a lifetime performing emotional labor for others. They defend their choices. They justify their peace. They react to every comment, every judgment, every small cruelty, as if their worth depends on being seen correctly. But Schopenhauer believed that the most exhausted souls aren't the ones who work too hard. They're the ones who spend years trying to make themselves understood by people who will never truly see them. He understood that trying to reason with someone who is committed to misunderstanding you is like trying to use a lantern to show a blind man the way. It is a waste of oil. What if the silence you feel when you stop reacting isn't coldness? What if it's clarity? These people aren't shutting down. They're safeguarding the quiet truth inside them. They're choosing solitude over the chore of being misunderstood. And if this feels familiar, you're about to understand why. The interesting part is that most people never notice when this shift happens. It's not dramatic. There's no announcement, no moment where you wake up and decide, today, I will stop caring what toxic people think. It's quieter than that. It happens after the 100th time someone misreads your silence as arrogance. After the 50th time you explain yourself and still get met with judgment. After years of watching people project their own noise onto your peace. One day, someone says something mean, and you just don't react. Your face stays calm. Your voice stays even. You don't defend. You don't explain. You don't try to correct their misunderstanding. You just let it sit there in the air between you. And something inside you feels lighter. To outsiders, it might look like you've become distant, cold, even. But internally, something profound has shifted. You've stopped performing. You've stopped translating your inner world into language that people who drain you can accept. And in that silence, you found something more valuable than their approval. You found yourself. I remember the first time I felt this. I was in my late 40s. A family member made a comment about how I never come to anything anymore. It was meant to sting. And for years, I would have explained. I would have listed all the times I did show up. I would have justified my need for rest, for quiet, for my own company. I would have offered up my energy as a sacrifice to their disappointment. But that day, I just looked at them and said, "You're right." And I left it there. No defense. No explanation. No emotional labor to make them understand something they had no interest in understanding. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable for me. It was relief. It was the physical sensation of a weight being lifted off my chest, a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying. Because I realized something Schopenhauer spent his life trying to articulate. The people who drain you the most aren't the ones who attack you openly. They're the ones who demand you explain your piece to them over and over again, as if your inner life is something that needs their approval to exist. And that day, I stopped giving it. I didn't announce it. I didn't make a scene. I just quietly withdrew the part of me that had been performing for an audience that was never going to applaud. And in that withdrawal, I found something I hadn't felt in decades. Freedom. Not the loud, celebratory kind of freedom. The quiet kind. The kind that settles into your bones and whispers. You don't owe anyone access to your inner world. Let's go a little deeper into the psychology of this. When you spend decades reacting to toxic people, you're not just responding to their words. You're responding to an invisible contract you signed without realizing it. The contract says, your worth is determined by how well you can make others understand you. And for years, you honored that contract. You explained yourself. You defended your choices. You tried to translate your inner world into language they could accept. You acted as the caretaker of their emotions, constantly adjusting your reality to make sure they felt comfortable. But here's what no one tells you. Some people don't want to understand you. They want to misunderstand you, because your peace, your solitude, your ability to be content in your own company, it threatens the noise they need to survive. Schopenhauer called this the will to life, the relentless, exhausting drive to assert oneself in the world. For some people, that drive includes needing to pull others into their chaos. They can't stand the idea that you found a way to live without their validation, so they poke, they judge, they make comments designed to make you react. And for years, you did, until one day, you didn't. And that's when everything changed, because the moment you stop feeding their need for reaction, you break the contract. You take back the power you didn't even realize you'd given away. This is where the psychology of Carl Jung becomes incredibly relevant. Jung spoke often about the shadow, the parts of ourselves we refuse to see, so we project them onto others. When a toxic person provokes you, they are often trying to offload their own shadow onto you. They want you to carry their anger, their confusion, their insecurity. If they can make you angry, then you become the angry one, and they can feel superior. If they can make you defensive, you become the insecure one, and they can feel confident. By reacting, you are accepting the package they are trying to hand you. You are agreeing to carry their shadow. But when you stop reacting, you refuse the delivery. You leave their shadow right there in their hands. And that is why your silence is so infuriating to them. Because without your reaction to distract them, they are forced to look at what they are holding. They are forced to sit with their own unresolved chaos. Pay attention to this part. The moment you stop reacting to toxic people isn't the moment you become cold. It's the moment you become clear. You're not shutting people out. You're protecting the quiet sanctuary you've built inside yourself. Because after years of trying to be understood by people who will never see you, you finally realize your peace doesn't need their permission. Your solitude doesn't need their approval. Your ability to be content in your own company doesn't need to be explained, justified, or defended. It just is. And that realization changes everything. To outsiders, it might look like you've become distant, detached, maybe even a little cold. But internally, you've never been more alive. Because you're no longer spending your energy on the exhausting performance of making yourself palatable to people who drain you. You're spending it on yourself, on your peace, on the quiet life you've been building in the margins of all that noise. Before we continue, I want to invite you to join this quiet corner of the internet. We are building a sanctuary here, a place where your solitude is validated, not questioned, where your peace is celebrated, not criticized. If you are tired of explaining yourself to a world that doesn't listen, subscribe. You have found your tribe. Share in the comments what part of this video felt most true to you, because what comes next is where everything becomes even clearer. And here's the paradox. The less you react to toxic people, the more they notice you. Not because you're doing anything dramatic, but because your calm becomes unsettling to them. Your silence becomes a mirror that reflects their own chaos back at them. And they don't like what they see. Because your peace exposes their noise. Your clarity exposes their confusion. Your ability to be content alone exposes their desperate need for constant validation. And that makes them uncomfortable. So they push harder. They make more comments. They try to provoke you into reacting. But you don't. And eventually, they stop. Not because they've changed, but because you're no longer feeding the dynamic they need to survive. You've become emotionally unavailable to their chaos. And in that unavailability, you've found a kind of safety you didn't know was possible. This quiet shift is happening all over the world. People in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, people who spent decades trying to fit into a social world that never felt right, are finally giving themselves permission to stop performing. Let me speak directly to you now. If you've spent years reacting to toxic people, you know what it feels like to carry the weight of other people's judgments in your body. You know what it feels like to lie awake at night replaying conversations, thinking of all the things you should have said. You know what it feels like to defend your need for quiet, for solitude, for your own company. As if those things are flaws that need justification. But here's what I want you to understand. The exhaustion you feel isn't because you're weak. It's because you've been doing invisible emotional labor for people who will never appreciate it. Schopenhauer wrote that the most sensitive souls are the ones who suffer the most in a world that values noise over depth. He believed that people who seek solitude aren't running away from life. They're protecting the richness of their inner world from the chaos of people who can't understand it. And that's exactly what you're doing when you stop reacting to toxic people. You're not giving up. You're choosing yourself. You're not becoming cold. You're becoming clear. You're not shutting down. You're finally opening up to the life you've been trying to build all along. The life where your energy is yours, where your peace is protected, where your home is a sanctuary, not a hiding place. There's a relief that comes with this realization, but there's also guilt. Because for years, you were taught that being a good person means being available, being understanding, being patient with people who drain you. And when you finally stop performing that emotional labor, a voice inside you whispers, "Am I being selfish?" Let me answer that for you. No, you're not being selfish. You're being honest. You're admitting that you don't have the energy to keep explaining yourself to people who have no interest in understanding you. You're admitting that your peace is more valuable than their approval. You're admitting that after years of trying, you're finally choosing solitude over the chore of being misunderstood. And that's not coldness. That's clarity. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. That's not isolation. That's sanctuary. Because there's a difference between loneliness and solitude. Loneliness is wanting connection and not having it. Solitude is choosing your own company because it feels like oxygen. Rilke, the poet of solitude, understood this distinction beautifully. He wrote to a young poet that he should not be afraid of his solitude, even if it felt vast and sometimes difficult to bear. He saw solitude not as an empty room, but as a garden. When you stop reacting to the noise of others, you finally have the silence necessary to tend to that garden. You begin to notice the thoughts that are actually yours, distinct from the thoughts you've absorbed from others. You begin to feel feelings that originate from your own soul, not from the friction of conflict. When you stop reacting to toxic people, you're not choosing loneliness. You're choosing the fertile ground of solitude. You're choosing the kind of peace that can only exist when you stop performing for people who will never see you. Here's a secret most people never say out loud. The people who judge you the most for your solitude are often the people who are most afraid of their own company. They can't stand silence. They can't stand stillness. They can't stand the idea of being alone with their own thoughts. So when they see you content in your solitude, it unsettles them. Because you're living proof that peace is possible without their noise. And instead of asking themselves why they can't find that peace, they project their discomfort onto you. They call you distant, cold, antisocial, but you're not any of those things. You're just someone who finally stopped performing for an audience that was never going to applaud. You're someone who realized that the cost of being understood by people who drain you is higher than the cost of being misunderstood. You're someone who chose peace over performance. And that choice, quiet as it is one of the bravest things you can do, because it means you're willing to be seen as cold in order to protect the warmth inside you. You're willing to be called distant in order to preserve the closeness you have with yourself. Schopenhauer spent much of his life writing about the paradox of human connection. He believed that most people are like porcupines trying to stay warm in winter. They huddle together for warmth, but the closer they get, the more they hurt each other with their quills. So they pull apart. Then they get cold again. Then they try again, over and over. But some people, Schopenhauer said, learn to generate their own warmth. They don't need the constant friction of social connection to feel alive. They find richness in their own company. They find peace in their own thoughts. And when you stop reacting to toxic people, that's exactly what you're doing. You're generating your own warmth. You're building your own sanctuary. You're choosing the quiet truth inside you over the loud opinions of people who will never understand. This doesn't mean you become a hermit. It doesn't mean you shut everyone out. It just means you stop wasting your energy on people who drain it. You stop defending your peace to people who don't value it. You stop explaining your solitude to people who see it as a flaw. And in that space, something beautiful happens. You start attracting people who understand you without needing an explanation. People who value your quiet. People who see your solitude not as something broken, but as something sacred. Because the truth is, when you stop performing for toxic people, you create space for the right people to find you. The people who don't need you to be louder, brighter, more social. The people who appreciate you exactly as you are. The people who understand that your silence isn't emptiness, it's fullness. Let's be clear about something. This isn't about being perfect. It's not about never reacting. It's not about becoming some stoic ideal who never feels hurt. You're still human. You'll still feel the sting of judgment. You'll still have moments where you want to defend yourself. But the difference is, you'll recognize those moments for what they are. Invitations to give your power away, and you'll choose not to. Not because you're cold, but because you've learned that your peace is worth more than their understanding. Not because you're weak, but because you've learned that silence is sometimes the strongest response. Not because you don't care, but because you've learned to care more about your own inner clarity than their external approval. And every time you make that choice, you get a little stronger, a little clearer, a little more at home in your own skin. There's a quiet strength that comes with this realization, a strength that doesn't announce itself, a strength that doesn't need validation. It's the strength of someone who has spent years trying to fit into a world that never felt right, and finally decided to build their own. It's the strength of someone who chose solitude over half-hearted connections. It's the strength of someone who stopped reacting to toxic people and started protecting the quiet truth inside them. And if you're reading this, you already know what that strength feels like. You know what it's like to walk away from a conversation without defending yourself. You know what it's like to let someone misunderstand you and feel relief instead of panic. You know what it's like to choose your own company over the exhausting performance of trying to be seen correctly. And that knowledge, quiet as it is changing you. It's teaching you that your worth isn't determined by how well others understand you. It's teaching you that peace is more valuable than approval. It's teaching you that the life you've been building in the margins, the quiet, simple, solitary life, isn't a consolation prize. It's the real prize. So here's what I want to leave you with. The next time someone says something cruel and you feel your body tense, remember this. You don't owe them a reaction. You don't owe them an explanation. You don't owe them access to your peace. You can just let their words sit there in the air. You can stay calm. You can stay quiet. And in that silence, you'll find something more valuable than their approval. You'll find yourself. You'll find the person you've been trying to protect all along. You'll find the peace you've been building in the margins of all that noise. And you'll realize that the silence you've been carrying isn't emptiness. It's fullness. It's the quiet truth inside you that doesn't need anyone's permission to exist. It's the sanctuary you've been building, brick by brick, conversation by conversation, every time you chose not to react. And it's yours, completely, utterly, beautifully yours. If this resonated with you, share it in the comments. Tell me what part felt most true. Because this quiet corner of the internet is for people like you. People who choose solitude over noise. People who protect their peace instead of defending it. A quiet corner of the internet for people who choose solitude over half-hearted connections.